Well, since I was a little kid, I have always loved storms. I don't know if anybody else in here is like that. Like, I love a good thunderstorm. Actually like a good hurricane. It sounds weird, right? When I lived in Kansas, I actually did chase tornadoes. Believe it or not, I did. I got in my car. Work got out because tornadoes were in the area. I just got in my car and went looking. Why not? What else do you do on a Kansas afternoon? But I love to sit out on the porch and listen to the rain, the thunder, see the lightning. Like in Kansas, it was like paparazzi flash. It's like pop, 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 pop. We don't get that out here. We don't. And I've just always been fascinated by it. But there's a power in storms that we have to respect. And if you grew up in eastern North Carolina, hurricanes come through at least on a semi-regular basis. Well, there's this place, if you remember back in 2018, I believe it was Hurricane Michael, came through the Gulf of Mexico. It blew up. I mean, Gulf of Mexico's hot, right? It's got 80, 90-degree waters in the middle of the summer. Well, this grew up to a Cat 5, and when it made landfall, it was a Category 4, so it actually made landfall with a sustained winds of 155 miles an hour. Yeah, that's fast. That does damage, and it brings a big surge in with it, and it's a destruction like that we don't see a ton unless you went out with us out to Spruce Pine last year and just saw the devastation of what water can do. Things wiped off the map. And this little town of Mexico, Florida, got walloped. I'm just going to use one of those country walloped. Where 8 foot, imagine an 8 foot wall of water. So now we're talking like maybe the bottom of this windowsill right here, just coming inland. And you can imagine what's going to happen if you have anything built right there. It's going to get devastated. And what we see here is a picture of that devastation. But I think you notice one thing. There's like this one little house right here. I say little house, but something's different about this, right? And if you've ever been to the beach, you know these houses have names, right? You know what this was named? The Sand Palace. So the Sand Palace looks like it's in a lot better shape than everything else around it. And it's only 150 yards from the ocean, or from the Gulf. Why is that? This house was built different than every other house around it. You see, the designers and the builders, when they looked at this, they said, we know what comes through this area. And I know what the state of Florida says. We watch home improvement shows. They say, man, it's got to be concrete reinforced. It's got to be this, that, or the other. They went above and beyond to ensure that this house stood no matter what storm came. We're going to talk about that as we go, because what I see in this is that we have been given plans by the architect now for what our life should look like. Jesus has been laying out these things, and what he has done is he tells us who we're designed to be. He tells us how we're to build our life and to be able to shape who we are, so that not just when the storms of life come, but when eternity comes to a moment where Jesus comes back, that we will be found standing, like we talked about, in and on the rock. And our response to the message that Jesus has been bringing matters. And how we build our life matters. So the point of today is this, is that a life of obedience to King Jesus is the only way to live wisely. Go back one for me, Avery. The life of obedience to King Jesus is the only way to live wisely. That's the point here. And we see that starting in this first part where it says wise living is an obedient response of a kingdom citizen, right? And the only way to live under the authority of a king is to be a citizen of that kingdom. And we've talked about what that looks like through the whole time, is that we are first acknowledge our spiritual bankruptness in chapter 5, verse 3. Right? And then we mourn the fact that there's nothing we can do about these things. And then it draws us to humbly come to Jesus to fill the need that we can't. And then that filling of us then fills us with a hunger and a thirst for righteousness, then works itself out in mercy, in pure heart, in peacemaking, in a willingness to stand under the persecution of being called a citizen of heaven. Right? The wise living is that obedient response. We live the way we were designed to live. Verse 24 is going to say it like this. It says, therefore, everyone. Last time I checked, everyone means everyone. Anyone who hears these words, I asked you to circle this, hears these words and acts on them. So they come in one ear, we process them, and we weigh it as valuable enough to warrant a response. And we act on them. Not the emotions that are drawn out of it, not of the feelings that come from it, not of man, this is going to cost X, Y, Z, I'm going to have to. No, we hear the word, and because we know and trust the one from whom it has come, we choose to act in his strength to do what he asks us to do. It's like a wise man who built his house on the rock, right? And we know what he's getting ready to say. He's going to say the rain fell, the river rose, because that's what happens in severe storms. The rains fall, and this isn't rain like, oh, it's a nice little mist and sprinkle. Like, it's not a summer shower. Like, it looks like, we were gone yesterday afternoon. It looks like there was a torrent of rain in Elizabeth City yesterday. Like, it poured buckets. Like, where we were at, it didn't rain at all. And I was like, oh, okay, this is nice. But, like, buckets. Now, imagine buckets for hours. And the rivers are going to rise. And the wind probably blew. That's why I imagine Hurricane Michael coming through. Imagine sitting in 155-mile-per-hour winds. We don't even drive that fast, but the wind's blowing that hard. Like, imagine sitting there, imagine hearing, I mean, you can hear it, right? You hear the hail hitting the top of the house. You hear the pine cones. If you learn here, pine cones are pelting. You may hear this limb fall and hit your house. You see like things just starting to slap because the wind's blowing so hard. If you've ever been in a house like that where things start to lift and pound and pound and pound, like you hear it and you feel it. The storm is raging. And then he gives us these two houses. And what I want us to see is that Jesus is in this moment, we're going to stay right there for a second, and Jesus in this moment is saying that everyone, right? Everyone is building a house, one. Two, there's two ways to build your house, right? And this should bring you back to last week. There's a narrow gate and a wide gate, right? But it's not just the narrow gate and the wide gate. Jesus is actually wrapping up the Sermon on the Mount. There's two kingdoms. There's your kingdom or his kingdom. There's no other choice. There's not a mixture of kingdoms. There's not a third way. It's either I'm living for him or I'm not. And then he's actually bringing all of Scripture to bear on this because we know that if we go to the Old Testament, as the scribes would have been teaching, like that has a lot to say about building your house on the way you were designed to live, which God has given you as your creator. So we know Jesus in this moment is making a clear distinction between these two foundations. And it's wise or it's foolish. We see that there's a wise man who built a house, and then we see there's this foolish guy. But everyone who hears the words of mine and doesn't act on will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Same rain, same river, same winds. But the difference was the foundation that he built his house on. James chapter 3, we're going to jump there real quick. Because James is it's kind of, a lot of times it's like James is summarizing the Sermon on the Mount in his whole book. He pulls some things out, he stretches them out. But he says this in 3:13, he says, who among you is wise and understanding? By his good conduct, he should show that his works are done in the gentleness that comes from wisdom. And he says this, but if you have bitter envy, selfish ambition in your heart, don't boast and deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. So he calls a spade a spade. Doing something from a position of focusing on my kingdom does not constitute wise living. Even if I make the right decision, but I'm doing it for the wrong reason. I'm looking to get ahead. He calls it earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Like, that's huge. That's strong words. But it's him, not me. Don't blame me. But he says, for where there's envy and selfish ambition, there is disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that's from above, right, is first pure. We see that in the Beatitudes, right? Then peace-loving. We see that in the Beatitudes. Gentle, compliant, full of mercy. That's in the Beatitudes. Good fruits. We've heard about that. Unwavering, without pretense. And that word, without hypocrisy. Without do as I say, not as I do. I live exactly what I'm telling you. God calls us to live because the world knows what God says a lot of times, and they look at us and go, you don't look anything like the God you proclaim. And that's a problem. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who cultivate peace. There is a wise living. So these houses, right? So if we were looking at these houses, right, from the outside, the houses might look the same. Have you ever been to the beach lately? And all the new construction all seems to look about the same outside. Maybe have a different color, but the porches, it's like a spec home. Everything looks the same. The only thing different is like what I do to the inside, kind of, and you can't see that. I would imagine if we went back to that picture, you don't got to do that, but like we would, if we had a before picture, which I could not find, like it would be one of these things where like I bet a lot of the houses kind of looked similar. They probably had a roof. Yes, we would agree every house has a roof, right? They probably had these piers down here, these pylons. Like it probably looked really similar. But this is where we have to get into to why this is a picture of what Jesus is talking about. Because I did some research in this, is that so everybody's got a roof, right? And it's got an overhang. Well, you know, the designers here, the overhang of the roof wasn't as large as other ones because it limited the ability of the wind to lift that roof off. If you've ever been to a beach house, you tend to have these big balconies, right? These comforts, like I can go out here, I can sit, I can have my coffee, I can watch the waves come in, right? They limited the balcony space. They limited the amount of windows that were out there so that there's less chance of things getting busted out and the wind getting into the house, right? But we might notice that. Like if you're driving, like oh man, that does look, it doesn't have quite these things. But here's the big difference. Here's a big difference. While most houses would have these pylons, the average depth of a pylon on Mexico, Florida's beaches is 10 to 15 feet. This house, 40 feet. They sunk the pylons 40 feet into the sand to find bedrock, to make sure that when the surge comes in, this house doesn't move. You can't see that looking from the outside. But when you can see it, is when the waves hit it. You can see it when the storm comes. Because what do you see as the result? There's one house left standing. That's our life. Anything that is built on a different foundation looks like the devastation. But you've got to consider one thing with this is like, so he's talking about the storm, and what do you mean storm? And it can mean the storms of life. Anybody in here gone through a hard time? Yeah, I thought so. I'm not the only one. Health issues, family issues, marital issues, relationship issues, friendship issues, job issues, financial issues. We could go on, right? We know the storms of life come. And honestly, if your life in different areas are not built on those foundational pieces that the Bible lays out as wise living, you have noticed that when the storm hits, things crash. Right? I'm not the only one, I don't think. Because I know there's areas in my life that when the storm hits, if the foundation it's built on is shaky, I have issues. I probably am more stressed out. I'm probably more this, that, or the other. My reaction changes. Like, things get threatened, and I respond. Right? But the storm Jesus is talking about is the final storm. Throughout the Bible, God's coming wrath at the end of time. And even in the book of Matthew, when he talks about the storm, when he talks about this language of, I'm looking through this very quickly. When he talks about following the way and those in the ends of times, like what's the difference? Like the preparedness, right? It's always in respect to the end time judgment. It's always the virgins. They weren't prepared. They didn't build. They weren't ready. And what happened? They got locked out. So Jesus is saying, like, weigh your foundation, inspect your foundation now. Are there things, right, in your life that are built on solid footings? The footings were the pillars that we saw. Are they solidly placed on the foundation? Inspect them. And Jesus has been given us ways, right, to do this. What do you do with your anger? What do you do with your sexual thoughts? What do you do with your what do you do with your love towards those who don't like you? Why do you give? Why do you pray? Why do you practice spiritual disciplines? What do you do with the things of this world? How's your judgment lately? He's been giving us things to inspect the foundation of our house. And I hope that you haven't been sitting here like the foolish person going, yeah, that sounds great. I'm just going to keep doing me, though. Because Jesus is calling you to a moment where you would actively engage in your faith. He's doing the same for me. There's moments through this that I have to do that. It can't be like one of the things we're teaching the kids today is like, have you ever built a sandcastle on the ocean, like right on the beach? What happens when the wave comes in? Unless you're a master builder that's putting stays and stuff in there, that sandcastle's gone. That turtle I showed y'all a few weeks back is no longer there, I promise. Like, it's gone. Because there is no foundation. And Jesus doesn't want our lives to be like that now or when he returns. So he calls us to inspect it. We want to be like the sandcastle house, not the sandcastle on the beach. Which means we have to guard against some things. And this is the big thing. It's like 2 points today and we're good, right? Is that we must guard against our tendency to acknowledge God's authority without being transformed by his grace. Jesus, you're great. You're a good teacher. But I'm just going to keep walking this way. I'm going to keep doing me. Because I'm good right now. I got money in the bank. I got peace. I'm happy. Things seem to be going well. All the while, I'm walking straight down the wide and broad road. We have to guard against. We're all prone to this. Like every one of us. Nobody escapes this. So as soon as you go, no, I wouldn't do that. You're waiting for that next thing to hit. So let's see this. And he says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, what things? The whole Sermon on the Mount, because we're at the end, right? Not just that section, the whole Sermon on the Mount. When he had finished saying these things, the crowds were astonished. You could throw in amazed, like emoji with the O face, like, what? He said, yeah, like, wow, like, but I want you to attach, instead of just attaching the emoji, I want you to attach that time where something just like took your breath away. Like, whoa, kind of moment. They were astonished at his teaching. Taking what they had heard before, really, but bringing with it what he says in verse 20 is because he was teaching them like one who had authority. You see, the teachers of the day, when they needed to boost their authority, they would reference a previous rabbi who had a reputation, who had authority, who had the people's ear. Jesus isn't doing that. Jesus doesn't need backup. He walks on the scene and is like, you've heard it said, I say this. And the people who were listening could tell how he was speaking was different. Have you ever heard that person where there's something about how they're giving you information that you're like, yeah, that's good. Like we would call it kind of charisma because like they've captured your attention already. They've already kind of like, yes, I will buy that thing off of QVC automatically. And like, because I really think I need that in my life. Right? I've stayed away from QVC. I don't think I've done that part yet, but I'm sure there's something where I've bought something and I'm just like, why did I get this in the first place? Like, I don't know. But Jesus he isn't bait and switching. He's laying clear, it's going to cost you everything. Your entire life has to be given to me. But what I give you in return is so much better than you could ever dream. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be free of trial. I'm not saying you're not going to have some suffering. I'm not saying that what happens is going to always make sense to you right now. But what I am saying is that the good Father, the good King, is there with you and strengthening you to walk through this moment so that you not only will survive, but you will flourish in the midst of the devastation that falls around you in such a way that He is made much of and we continue to walk. They are seeing this authority come down and they're going, this guy is like nothing we have ever seen before. But the thing was, when they heard this, and this word authority, in the chapters to come, demons are getting kicked out. People are being healed. Storms are stopped storming. We're just going to use that word. Storms are stopped storming. Not just that the wind stopped and the water stopped and the rain stopped, right? The waves even stopped. Like it went from, if you've ever seen a storm on the sea, when the storm ceases, the waves are still rocking. Sometime for days after, no, the waves stopped. Peace be still. And everything did it. Like that's the type of authority he's about to flex. He'll say in Matthew 28, all authority is given to me in heaven and on earth. And that's the promise that he then goes, therefore go, make disciples of all nations, baptize them in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to what? Obey all that I've commanded you. Teach them to hear and act. Right? So that's what they're getting to see. And the people, what happens and what we know about the crowd is that this same crowd that heard them and said, man, this is amazing, is the same sound, the same crowd that then yelled, crucify him. You see, they heard this astonishing, this wow moment, and it did nothing to their heart. Jesus, you're a great teacher, but I like the way I'm living. I like my decisions about relationships. I like my decisions about my finances. I like my creature comforts. I like this, that, or the other. But God, I'm good. Many walked away astounded but unmoved. We can be astounded or amazed at the promises of the kingdom, but never be moved under the authority of the king. And that's scary. Like what he does can blow our minds, but it never moves us to give him everything. And that's what we want. That's what we need. A life of obedience to King Jesus is the only way to live wisely. We want to hear his words and respond with our life. Hear his words, respond with our life. And it comes from us going, this is my loving creator. If he created me, let's put the pieces together. He probably knows how I should function. He probably knows what I was designed to do. He probably understands my inner workings, my feelings, my emotions. He knows every bit of me, because in Psalms 139, what does it say? He knitted me together in my mother's womb. Little JoJo right now in Morgan's womb is being knitted together by her heavenly Father and King. But she has to acknowledge him as that before her life will ever move in a direction that he has designed for her. We all have to do that. We have to yield our right to rule our own life. That's what it's been about, right? Laying down your right to be angry. Laying down your right to have to follow through on your, like, laying down your right to be mad at somebody who has done something to you in order to extend peace and grace and love to them so that they might see Jesus. Lay down my right to have all the pleasures of this world if God calls me to the other side of the world or to the other side of the street. We have to come under the authority of the King. And the sad reality is that apart from Christ, we can't afford the building measures that a life built like the sand castle takes. We can't afford it. We need Jesus to step into that moment. That's why people couldn't, in that community, they couldn't afford what those people did for that house. They couldn't afford to drill down. It cost 2 times as much to build that house as any other house around there. We can't do enough character work to look like Christ, to love like Christ, to live like Christ. We can't. We need him to do that work inside of us. We have to drill down to bedrock. So as we come to the end of the Sermon on the Mount, right? How has hearing the words of Jesus affected your life? Like, have they been a cause for pause? Like, man, there's some things in my life that, God, you want to work on. It's not about perfection, right? It's not about performance. I checked the boxes. But it's about a deepening intimacy with our Father and King. And then as that intimacy grows, as that foundation gets deeper and stronger, we notice our character reflecting him more. Where are you at the end of Jesus' words? Can you see a greater obedience to King Jesus? That's the measure. Whether it's 1 step, 1 increment, or 10, am I getting to be more like him? Everyone's building a house. Every breath, every step, every day. And it's a testimony to what we're chasing. And we said at the beginning, this is a kingdom that every heart longs for. Whether you acknowledge it or not, that's what we've been talking about, right? But this is the kingdom we're seeking. This is the flourishing we're seeking. This is the love and the life that we all desire in our heart of hearts. And Jesus has now offered exactly what we long for. But will we respond? And I hope that out of these last 17 weeks, there's been at least one thing where you're like, God, I'm responding to this. I want you to change me and transform me in this. I need your grace for this. And he'll meet you there. He'll walk with you. He's not just a king and father, he's a shepherd who's already gone down the road, knows what's coming, and has come back to walk with you. Will you be a part of a community of people walking in that direction? Will you invite people into the struggle? Because I can't see my blind spots, right? That's why they're called blind spots. We need other people.